I'm Piper, 34, female. I live in a small apartment that smells faintly of cedar chips and animal feed, a professional hazard I've come to love. By day, I'm a senior zookeeper, responsible for the big cat enclosures, a job that requires patience, a steady hand, and the ability to read situations without a single word being spoken. It turns out that last skill is just as useful with people as it is with leopards. I thought my biggest worry was a sick tiger or a funding cut, but it ended up being my own father and his attempt to lock me in a financial cage. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. My life has always been structured around caring for others. At the zoo, it's my snow leopards and Amur tigers. At home, for the past year, it had been my father, Robert. When my mother passed away after a long illness, it felt like the world had tilted on its axis. She was the glue of our family, the quiet strength that balanced my father's larger-than-life personality. He'd been a financial advisor before retiring, a man who could command a room with a confident smile and talk anyone into anything. But after Mom was gone, that confidence crumbled. He seemed lost, adrift in their big, empty house, so I stepped up. I spent my weekends at his place, sorting through Mom's things, stocking his fridge, making sure bills were paid. It was exhausting, juggling my demanding job with his needs, but he was my dad. You do what you have to do. He was always grateful in his own way. I don't know what I'd do without you, Pipes, he'd say, patting my hand before turning back to the golf channel on TV. About 6 months into this new routine, Diane appeared. She was a real estate agent he'd met at the golf club, a woman with perfectly styled blonde hair, a dazzlingly white smile, and a laugh that seemed a little too loud for any room she was in. She was everything my mother wasn't, polished, assertive, and very, very interested in my father's finances. At first, I was happy for him. He was smiling again, going out, living a little. Diane would gush about how wonderful it was that I took such good care of him. "Your father is so lucky to have you, Piper," she'd say, her eyes scanning our family photos on the mantelpiece, but I couldn't shake a feeling of unease. My mom had been a careful planner. She had her own inheritance from my grandparents, which she had protected fiercely in a trust fund just for me. It was her legacy, her way of ensuring I would always be independent. "Don't ever let a man control your money, Piper," she'd told me 100 times. "Not your husband, not your brother, not even your father." My father knew about the trust, of course, but the details were mine alone. It was a substantial amount, enough to guarantee I'd never have to worry. I rarely thought about it, content with my zookeeper's salary and simple life. It was just a safety net, a final gift from my mom. Diane, however, seemed to have a sixth sense for money. She'd make little comments, asking about my apartment, my car, my future plans, all with a casual air that felt anything but. I started to feel less like a daughter and more like a line item on a balance sheet. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning. I was in the middle of a feeding demonstration with Apollo, our oldest tiger, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it, but it buzzed again, and then a third time. It was my dad. That was unusual. He knew my schedule. I excused myself and answered, a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. "Piper, thank goodness," he said, his voice strained with a false sense of urgency. "I need you to meet me at the bank tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. It's important." "The bank, Dad, what's going on? Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine, just some financial housekeeping. You know, planning for the future. Diane's been helping me get organized. We just need your signature on a few things to streamline the accounts." The phrase sounded slick and rehearsed, like something from one of his old sales pitches. "What accounts? What am I signing?" I asked, my voice sharp. Apollo let out a low chuff from his enclosure, as if sensing my agitation. "It's just boring estate stuff, Pipes, too complicated to explain over the phone. Just be there. Your mother would have wanted us to get this sorted." He hung up before I could ask another question. The mention of my mother was a low blow, and he knew it. He was using my love for her as leverage. I spent the rest of the day with a sense of dread hanging over me. My best friend, Sarah, a wildlife biologist who worked with our zoo on conservation projects, met me for coffee after work. I told her about the call. Sarah was the most level-headed person I knew. She listened patiently, her brow furrowed in concentration. "That sounds fishy, Piper," she said finally. "Why the rush, and why won't he tell you what you're signing? Streamlining is what you say when you don't want someone to read the fine print." She was right. My father had never been secretive about finances before. In fact, he loved explaining them in excruciating detail. This new vagueness was a massive red flag. He said Diane was helping him. I mumbled, stirring my cold coffee. Diane, the real estate agent. Sarah's eyes narrowed. The one who's been with him for 5 minutes. Piper, you have to be careful. People can change when money is involved, especially when a new partner is whispering in their ear. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about my mother's words, don't ever let a man control your money. I felt like I was betraying her memory just by agreeing to the meeting. But what choice did I have? He was my father. Refusing to go would cause a huge fight, and he would twist it to make me look like the ungrateful, untrusting daughter. I decided I would go, but I would not sign a single thing until I understood it completely. I had no idea that my simple plan to be cautious would be no match for the emotional pressure they were about to apply. I showed up at the bank the next morning feeling like I was walking into an ambush. My father and Diane were already there, sitting in the waiting area. He was dressed in a crisp suit, looking more like the powerful financial advisor of his past than the grieving retiree I'd been caring for. Diane was wearing a bright red dress and an even brighter smile. She jumped up and gave me a hug that felt like a python squeeze. Piper, darling, so glad you could make it. We were just saying how responsible it is to get these things in order, she chirped. The bank manager, a kind-looking man named David Chen, led us into his office. He seemed a bit flustered, as if the meeting had been arranged at the last minute. As we sat down, my dad launched into his speech. He talked about his age, his health, and his desire to make things simpler, for me in the long run. Diane nodded along, adding comments like, he's just thinking of you, honey, at every opportunity. It was a well-rehearsed performance. The first hint that something was seriously wrong came from Diane. While my father was explaining a complex point about estate taxes, she chimed in. And once we have access to the primary funds, we can move forward on the beach house. It'll be a wonderful family investment for all of us. The room went silent. My father shot her a look of pure fury. We access beach house. The words hung in the air. I looked from Diane's suddenly pale face to my father's tight-lipped anger. He quickly tried to recover. Diane means, for the future, an investment for you, Piper, way down the line. But the mask had slipped. It wasn't about simplifying things for me. It was about getting their hands on my money. Mr. Chen, the bank manager, cleared his throat uncomfortably and suggested we might need more preliminary paperwork before we could proceed with whatever this was. I used his comment as an excuse. I told them I wasn't feeling well and needed to think. I stood up, ignored my father's protests, and walked out of the bank, my heart pounding in my chest. That weekend, I went to my father's house under the pretense of dropping off groceries. He was out golfing with Diane. The house felt different, colder. Her touches were everywhere. New cushions on the sofa, fancy scented candles, and a large, framed photo of the two of them on the wall where a picture of my mom used to be. A cold fury washed over me. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about him erasing my mother. I went into his home office, the one he always kept meticulously organized. Something drew me to his old wooden desk. The bottom right drawer, which had always been unlocked, was now secured with a small, new lock. It was completely out of character. My dad was a man of habit. He never changed his systems. My mind raced back to what Diane had said. What were they hiding? I remembered that my dad kept a spare set of small keys in a ceramic bowl in the kitchen. My hands shaking, I found the key that fit. I took a deep breath and turned it. The lock clicked open. The contents of the drawer felt like a punch to the gut. It wasn't filled with old mementos or miscellaneous office supplies. It was a neatly organized folder with Diane's name written on the tab in her perfect, loopy handwriting. Inside, my carefully constructed denial shattered into a million pieces. The first documents I pulled out were glossy brochures for a luxury beach-front property. It was a stunning, multi-million-dollar home in a gated community, the kind of place my father had always called obnoxiously extravagant. Tucked inside one of the brochures was a preliminary purchase agreement. It was in Diane's name alone. My eyes scanned the page for the purchase price, and I felt sick. It was a figure that could only be paid for with a massive infusion of cash, my cash. Beneath the brochures was a stack of my father's personal bank statements from the last few months. I had never pried into his finances, assuming he was comfortable with his retirement savings, but the statements told a different story. There were huge credit card bills filled with charges for things he would never buy, Designer clothes, expensive jewelry, five-star hotel stays. There were cash withdrawals for thousands of dollars at a time. He was bleeding money, and it was all happening since Diane came into the picture. But the final page in the folder was the worst. It was a printout from a legal website, a draft of a document giving him full power of attorney over my mother's trust fund. It would grant him the authority to manage, withdraw, and transfer all the assets as he saw fit. This was the document they wanted me to sign. They weren't just planning to ask for my money, they were planning to take complete control of it. My mother's legacy, her gift of independence to me, was going to be used as a down payment on a beach house for the woman who was trying to replace her. I felt a dizzying mix of rage and heartbreak. This wasn't just a poor financial decision, it was a profound betrayal. My father, the man who was supposed to protect me, was actively plotting to steal from me, all while smiling to my face and telling me he loved me. He was using my grief and my sense of duty against me. I took photos of every single document with my phone, my hands trembling so badly I had to take each shot twice. Then I carefully put everything back, locked the drawer, and returned the key. I walked out of that house and didn't look back. As I drove, the tears I'd been holding back finally came hot and bitter. I went straight to Sarah's house. I showed her the photos, the story tumbling out of me in a torrent of angry, disjointed sentences. She didn't interrupt. She just listened, her expression growing harder with every picture I showed her. "Okay," she said, her voice firm once I had finished. "The good news is that you know. The bad news is that they're not going to give up. A simple no won't be enough. Your dad will lay on the guilt so thick you'll drown in it. Diane will play the victim. They'll isolate you and wear you down until you sign. So what do I do?" I asked, my voice small. "You can't fight them head on in an emotional battle. You'll lose," she said, thinking hard. "You have to be smarter. You have to use their own arena, the bank, the official documents, the rules. You need a plan, the official documents, the rules. You need a plan that doesn't involve yelling or crying. You need a plan that they won't see coming." And in that moment, sitting in Sarah's quiet living room, the seed of an idea began to form. An idea that was terrifying, but also felt like my only way out. The next few days were a masterclass in avoidance. I screened my father's calls, responding only with brief, noncommittal texts. I told him I had a hectic work schedule and needed more time to review the financial streamlining. Idea. His messages became more insistent, laced with guilt. "I'm your father, Piper. I'm only trying to help you secure your future." Diane sent syrupy texts about how worried they were about me. It was a coordinated attack designed to make me feel like I was the one being unreasonable. But their pressure only strengthened my resolve. Sarah and I spent an evening brainstorming. We knew a direct confrontation was useless. They would deny everything and paint me as paranoid. Calling them out on the documents I'd found would only make them hide their tracks better. I couldn't just get a new lawyer and send a cease and desist. My father was still the coat, rusty on the account, even if he didn't have unilateral control. He had to be managed, and the next bank meeting was unavoidable. He had already scheduled another one, telling me it was non-negotiable. My plan had to be subtle. It had to happen right under their noses. I couldn't rely on my own strength to say no to my father's face when he was turning on the emotional pressure. I needed an ally, and the only potential ally I had was the one person in the room who was bound by professional ethics, the bank manager, David Chen. I remembered his uncomfortable expression during the first meeting. He had sensed something was wrong. I had to find a way to communicate with him without my father or Diane realizing it. The plan was simple, but its execution had to be perfect. I took a small, stiff piece of cardstock from my desk, the kind used for presentation notes. On it, I wrote 7 simple words in clear block letters. "I am being pressured. Please help me." Below that, I added a smaller line, "Ask to speak with me alone." I practiced what I was going to do a dozen times in my apartment. I would hold my driver's license and the note together, pinched between my thumb and forefinger. When Mr. Chen asked for my ID to verify my identity, a standard bank procedure, I would slide them both across the desk. The note would be face down. I would have to trust him to be discreet enough to see it and understand. The night before the meeting, I almost lost my nerve. What if he didn't see it? What if he saw it and ignored it? What if he thought I was being overly dramatic? I called Sarah, my voice shaking. "It's a solid plan, Piper." She reassured me. Bank managers are trained to spot signs of elder abuse and financial coercion. You're not an elderly person, but the principle is the same. He has a duty to ensure his client isn't being forced into something. You just have to give him a clear signal. This is that signal. She was right. I had to trust a stranger. My own father had proven he was untrustworthy, so my best hope was placing my faith in the professionalism of a man I had met only once. I folded the small card and tucked it securely into my wallet. The next morning, I would walk back into that bank, not as a zookeeper or a grieving daughter, but as a strategist. I was done being the prey. It was time to set my own trap. The air in the bank manager's office was even thicker with tension than the first time. My father and Diane were already seated, a united front of false concern. My father didn't look at me with warmth, but with an intensity that said, "You will not embarrass me again." Diane's smile was plastered on, but her eyes were cold and calculating. Mr. Chen greeted me professionally and closed the door. On his desk was a neat stack of papers. My stomach churned. This was it. "Thank you for coming back in, Piper." My father began, taking control of the meeting immediately. "I know you were a bit overwhelmed last time. We've had the bank simplify the documents so they're easier to understand. It's a simple power of attorney transfer for the trust. It just allows me to manage the assets more efficiently on your behalf, for our future." Diane added, placing a perfectly manicured hand on my father's arm. Mr. Chen cleared his throat. "Before we begin," he said, looking directly at me, "I just need to verify your identity again for our records. May I see your driver's license, MS Piper?" My heart hammered against my ribs. This was the moment. I opened my wallet, my fingers fumbling slightly. I pulled out my license, making sure the small, folded note was hidden directly behind it. Taking a steadying breath, I leaned forward and slid them across the polished wood of the desk. I pushed them just far enough so they were out of my father's line of sight, but directly in front of Mr. Chen. He picked up the license, his eyes on it. For a terrifying second, I thought he'd missed the note. But then, as he went to hand the license back, his fingers brushed the cardstock. He paused. Without changing his expression, he subtly separated the note from the license, glanced down at it for a fraction of a second, and then placed a paperweight on top of it, as if it were a stray business card. His face remained a perfect mask of professional neutrality. He hadn't given anything away, but I saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes. He turned back to the documents. "All right," he said, his tone shifting almost imperceptibly. "So, Robert, you're looking to assume full managerial control of the trust." He proceeded to ask my father a series of pointed, technical questions about tax implications and fiduciary duties. My father, who was used to being the expert, began to flounder. He was good at broad strokes and persuasion, not the nitty-gritty details Mr. Chen was suddenly demanding. After a few minutes of this, Mr. Chen held up a hand. "You know, there are a few additional liability forms that the bank's legal department now requires for a transfer of this nature. They're quite new." He stood up. "Robert, Diane, would you mind waiting outside for just a moment while I print them? My personal printer in here is acting up. It will only take a minute." My father looked annoyed but nodded, of course. As soon as the door clicked shut behind them, Mr. Chen sat back down and looked at me, his expression now full of concern. "MS Piper," he said in a low voice, the note. "Are you okay? Are you being pressured to sign these documents?" The relief was so immense it was like a physical weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The words tumbled out of me in a hushed, frantic whisper. I told him everything, about Diane, the beach house, the locked drawer, the bank statements. He listened without interruption. When I finished, he gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Thank you for trusting me. You did the right thing. Under no circumstances will you be signing anything today. Let me handle this." He stood, went to the door, and invited my father and Diane back in. They sat down, eager to get my signature. Mr. Chen looked at them gravely, after reviewing the trust's original charter. He said, his voice firm and official, "And considering the complexities involved, I'm afraid we cannot proceed with this transfer today. We will need to conduct a full internal review, including consulting with our legal team, to ensure all fiduciary responsibilities are being met. It's a matter of due diligence." My father's face went from confident to furious. "Due diligence. It's a simple transfer. I'm her father." "I understand, sir," Mr. Chen said calmly. "But this is a significant trust with specific protective clauses written in by the grantor, your late wife. The bank must and will respect her original intent. The review will take several weeks, perhaps longer. We will be in touch." He stood up, signaling the meeting was over. The pressure was off the pen, and for the first time in months I could breathe. The car ride I had been forced to share with my father and Diane back to his house was silent and suffocating. The moment we were inside, the dam of my father's anger broke. "What did you say to him?" He roared, his face red. "You embarrassed me. You made me look like a fool." Diane was right behind him. "After all we're trying to do for you, some people would be grateful for a father who cares so much about their future." At this time I didn't flinch. The fear that had held me captive for so long was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I had an ally. I had the truth. "Your future, Diane, you mean?" I said, my voice steady. "The one with the multi-million-dollar beach house in your name. I know everything. I know about the purchase agreement you hid in the desk. I know about the credit card bills and the money you've been spending. You're not getting 1 cent of my mother's money." The color drained from their faces. They were stunned into silence. I had expected denials, but seeing the pure shock in their eyes told me I had hit the mark completely. They never imagined I would find out. "Piper." My father started, his voice suddenly weak, the anger replaced by a desperate panic. "It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think," I interrupted. "Mom told me to never let anyone, not even you, control my money. I didn't understand how important that was until now. She wasn't just protecting her money, she was protecting me from you." I put my key to his house on the kitchen counter. "I'm done. I'm done being your keeper, your retirement plan, and your excuse. You need to find another way to fund your new life." I walked out the door and didn't look back. The next day, I followed Mr. Chen's advice. He had connected me with a trust lawyer, who immediately began the process of removing my father as a co-trustee, citing clear evidence of intent for financial malfeasance. We opened a new account at a different bank branch, and within a month, my mother's legacy was moved, secured, and entirely under my own control. The leash was cut. I never spoke to my father again. He sent a few angry, rambling emails, which I deleted without reading. Sarah told me she saw Diane's real estate sign in front of his house a few months later. He had to sell the family home my mother had loved so dearly. I felt a pang of sadness, not for him, but for the memory of the father I thought I had. My life is quiet now, and it's my own. My work at the zoo is more fulfilling than ever. Sometimes, when I'm watching Apollo the tiger, pacing the boundaries of his enclosure, I think about the different kinds of cages people live in. Some have bars of steel, others have walls of guilt and obligation. My father tried to build one for me, but he underestimated me. He forgot that I spend my days with powerful predators. I know how to be patient, I know when to stand my ground, and I know exactly how to open a lock.